sand's going to be blowing in this morning. I mean, there's tons of wind. I really do feel sorry for these fans out there. The weather is horrendous. It's windy, it's wet. Yeah, all the forces are coming at it today.
I mean, they look pretty miserable in the grandstands right now with their ponchos on and their hoods pulled down. But, Anne, I mean, the weather here changes all the time, so they do need to get out and just see what it's like out there at some point.
Yeah, I think if this rain is going to be around for the remainder of the weekend, then it is important that the drivers get out there, the teams can learn these conditions, because these might be the conditions you end up qualifying in or racing in. So, yeah, it looks like we're in for a blustery, wet weekend here at Zandvoort, but I'm sure we'll see some dry periods as well. And it's going to be a challenge for everyone to get up to speed as quickly as possible on which will be an ever-changing racetrack throughout.
Yeah, the evolution here is something else. Let's go down now to the pit lane, where a very wet and cold Bernie Collins is for us this weekend. Bernie, what's it like down there? And are you seeing much movement around you in terms of cars looking to go out?
Well, hello, Rachel. Yeah, it's nice to be down here in the pit lane. It's good to be back from the summer break, but it is wet and windy down here. And a big shout out to you, Rachel, because it's your coat that I'm actually wearing. And if I just step out a little bit, you can see the wind. The wind's really blowing down this thing. See the head? The wind's really blowing down the pit lane here. It's pretty wet and the hair is not going to survive for very long. But there's lots of people on the pit walls. They're all ready to see if the session starts on time and gets away, but there's not a lot of movement in the garages. One of the things that we have seen is Ferrari had some big rakes on one of the cars yesterday, obviously planning to do some tests, and they've taken that off today because they're not going to get a lot of information that's very good. So it's pretty quiet down here at the minute, Rachel.
Well, Bernie, I wanted to ask you actually, because from your time working with the teams, you've come back from the summer break, you might have upgrades you want to test out, you want to get back in the car, you want to see what you've got for the rest of this season. So how frustrating is it for you, and what can they do in a session like this?
It's always frustrating to lose a session. You know, FP1 here, you want to get a read on the car, FP1 at every track, but this track is quite short. You know, the lap times are going to be really tight in qualifying. You want to get everything out of the car. It is the same for everybody, but you're just keen to get going. You've done all the prep yesterday as you normally would, so it is just about try and crack on with it now, get that all-important learning that you need for the rest of the weekend.
All right, thanks very much for the moment, Bernie, and you're welcome to keep the coat for the rest of the weekend as long as you need it, because it is pretty horrid out there right now. Did you used to like these conditions? Would you want to go out in these conditions?
Yeah, I like these conditions, and it's easy as a driver sometimes to switch off when you have conditions like this, thinking, well, it's going to dry up at some point, that's when the real work begins. But it is important to stay switched on, stay motivated, and treat it as seriously as you can, because like we said, it can come and bite you later on if you get these exact conditions later on in the weekend. So getting the plan together, as we see Daniel Ricciardo and his engineer Pierre Hamlin walk towards the car on the right hand side of the garage there, and they'll be talking through their plans of how they're going to now tackle this session, as George Russell with his engineer look a little bit more relaxed on the Mercedes side of things, but I'm sure at some point they will be getting out there, but not on those hard compound tyres.
I still always maintain that the Brits, Scandinavians, and I'd go as far as say Belgians, maybe even the Dutch, have somewhat of an advantage in these conditions, and that's why I think you are comfortable in these conditions, Anne, because I grew up in South Africa and we didn't see much rain there, so whenever it did rain I went, oh, okay, now what? But I did learn the more I was in Europe to deal with these conditions. But the thing for me that really puts the spanner in the works is the wind, because that just brings you a level of unpredictability. I mean, when that wind gets up under your wings, all of a sudden you could just lose the car from under you, and it just makes things so much harder to read. Very difficult also for teams bringing upgrades to a race like this to get a gauge on exactly what the car's doing and setup. Finding the right setup in these conditions, very, very tricky.
Fernando Alonso, one man who will be relishing these conditions, pretty good in these. He's actually just turned 43 over the summer break, Fernando Alonso, but he's been beaten 3 out of the last 4 GP by teammate Lance Stroll. He'll be looking to get things back on track in this second half. He's not had the last few races he would have wanted. I know there have been difficult things with I mean, they've had updates on the car that didn't necessarily work, did they? And they went backwards on a couple of them or tried some other things.
Yeah, it's either Lance Stroll getting up to speed in these cars. I think the drivers, as we heard from Lewis Hamilton before, even a driver like Lewis saying, I'm still really getting used to this new generation of car. I didn't feel at home immediately with it, and the better the car gets, the more grip that the car can produce, the more he's feeling at home with it. So yeah, if a driver like Lewis finds it difficult to follow and chase the ever-changing balance of these new cars, and I still say, you know, third year in, relatively new, I think someone like Lance Stroll could be chasing that as well, of course, and maybe it's him getting quicker, or maybe on Fernando's side of the garage, a bit of frustration in terms of the car it started the season incredibly quick last year, and they've lost that performance, and maybe he's now thinking outside the box in terms of setup. You never know what's going on in terms of how comparing two drivers with each other. We don't
it's
have
easy for us, isn't it, to look at numbers and actually no, there's a lot more to it. We just saw Pierre Gasly on track. He's got a new teammate for next season announced this morning. Alpine will have Jack Doohan in the other car. Esteban Ocon, of course, has moved to this team to drive for Haas next season. They're one of the 3 teams that still have a seat left for 2025. Kevin Magnussen not confirmed his future yet, as far as I'm aware. So we're waiting to find out who's in that other Haas seat. So yes, Carlos Sainz announcing he's moved to Williams as well. That happened over the summer break. Any surprises there?
I think he was slowly starting to run out of options. I think he was really holding out to see if Mercedes would budge and potentially give him a multi-year contract. Obviously, if Max, you know, wasn't really saying he was going anywhere, I think a lot of people knew that he would most likely stay at Red Bull, but there was talks at some points of him potentially going to Mercedes. So I guess there were 2 potential options there, but I think when I spoke to him in Monaco, had a lovely helicopter shoot over Monaco, and he was saying that he wanted to be with a team that values him. I don't think he wanted to play second fiddle to anybody or, you know, not be treated as a real asset, because I think he's doing some incredible things out on track, and he's proving that he's a driver who adds a lot of value to a team. So I think that's what he wanted, and he sees a project at Williams that potentially over the next few years could develop into something great.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to him yesterday. Oh,
how's the track?
It's pretty wild with the wind.
It's a rough old ride for Hulkenberg getting back on track there, wasn't it, on the exit of turn 10.
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying, I spoke to Carlos, you'll be able to hear it across the weekend, but he was saying that he's seen in Williams what he saw at McLaren just before he left, which was in 2 or 3 years' time, they will be fighting where McLaren are now. He said, I saw that coming. Obviously, when Ferrari came calling, I'm not going to say no to Ferrari, but I could see already the progression that was going to be happening at McLaren, and he feels that's the position Williams are in, which is why he signed for them for next season. Let's watch this again now.
Yeah, so this is exiting turn 9. He makes a mode change there and then just locks the inside front. It's just a classic case of the tyres cold there, and maybe a slight lapse of concentration as well, because he had just changed the mode to push mode, which I guess would have given him more power for the next lap. But yeah, that's the bit I saw, and we picked him up on the approach back onto the circuit. Really rough off track there, but I don't think it would have done any damage to the car at that kind of speed.
Getting more cars out on track, Carlos is among them. So if you fancy watching on board with any one of the 20 drivers on this year's grid, you can do so. Even Robert Schwartzman, who's in the Sauber this weekend as well. You can, there you go, on board with Carlos Sainz around this circuit here in Zandvoort. You can watch your favourite driver. You can listen into their team radio as well. Just download the Sky Sports app, and you can scan the QR code to do that right now. Once you're there, log in with your Sky ID. Head to the Sky Sports F1 channel and choose your favourite driver. Sky Glass, Sky Q and Sky Stream customers can also access this via the interactive button on your remote control.
Yeah, as we're looking back at Robert Schwartzman here in the Sauber, and yeah, he's another driver looking to, he's chipping away, trying to get into Formula One full-time. Got an incredible amount of talent. We've seen that in F2 in the past, and the moments we've seen him shine in a Formula 1 car on the Friday running, and it's just it's an excruciating feeling when you're a driver in that position. You're so close, but yet it feels so far in many ways. You're teetering on the edge of stardom in Formula 1. It's happened for Ollie Behrman, of course, great for him. But
yeah, I was going to say, we've got Ollie and Jack now on the grid, 2 rookies next year, whereas we didn't have any rookies this year. How much of a motivation, inspiration is that if you're coming through the ranks?
The problem is in Formula 1 you've got 20 seats, right? That isn't very many. So the opportunities to come in when you've got guys on multi-year contracts, so even if we say there's 20 seats, there aren't necessarily 20 available seats. So it is really, really tough to get into. And I mean, Jack is a great, you know, story. Let's just see as Carlos goes. Oh, big puddle of water there on the inside of the curb. But yeah, bouncing around there. Cutting curves, trying to make a straighter line out of that. But look, I mean, Jack's a great example of a driver who's been waiting behind the curtains for quite some time, behind the scenes, doing a lot of, I don't know, I guess what I would call dirty work, you know, all the sim work, the late night stints, flying over and not really getting any other glory for it. So for him to finally have a seat, I mean, he was in limbo for so long, for so many years, is great news for him. Now the question is, how have those years on standby affected his driving? Has it not? We're going to have to wait to find out. But they've decided to put him in. They know what they're doing, and hopefully it'll pay off. But yeah, just congratulations to him, and thankfully his hard work's paid off, and hopefully doors will open for more drivers as well.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it, when you've had a race, a year out of racing. He did manage to race another series before, but this year he's had a whole year out of racing. He's just done the sim work, and the odd times he can get on track in this car in the FP1 session. So,
and what you hope for when you're a driver coming in as well, or like we mentioned, Robert Schwartzman there before, who at the moment doesn't have a contract for an F1 seat for next year. What you hope is that your immediate competition that are getting the chances, like Ollie Behrman, that they do a great job. You actually will them on.
You guys more, yeah.
See, us young guys, we can do it.
We can jump in and do well.
And you know what? Oscar Piastri flies the flag for the current generation very well indeed for that current generation of F1 driver.
Well, that's very good timing that you said that, because we're going to go talk to Bernie now, who's down at McLaren. So it's almost as if you're a pro at this.
Seamless.
Bernie, what did you go?
I thought you were going to say I was the pro, but we'll do the Prix.
Sorry.
That's all right. But just a quick update on the weather. It has actually stopped raining, and it, being optimistic, it's a little bit brighter here at the moment. But yes, see Oscar Piastri stood in the garage behind me. His McLaren doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon, but they have got a whole raft of upgrades in this McLaren today. So they have got a new front brake duct scoop. So the scoop on the front of the brake duct has changed. As a result of that, some of the front suspension has changed in order to allow that improved flow cleanly to the back of the car. They've also changed along the floor edge, and then as well as that, the rear corner and a new rear wing and beam wing at the back of the car. Now the new rear wing is because this is a circuit that demands a little bit more downforce, so that's a bit circuit specific, but there are a whole host of changes on both of these McLarens. So although they're stood in the garage very quiet now, they will be very keen to get out and test those upgrades and make sure that it is working this weekend, because they're on both cars and it will significantly change the layout and the flow of air across this car, and hopefully make them a little bit faster.
Thanks very much, Bernie, for the moment. I mean, are they the biggest challenges to Red Bull this weekend? I mean, Red Bull have won the last 3 here with Max, but they have a very different proposition this year.
They do have a very different proposition. I mean, McLaren clearly have been the biggest, challenger to Red Bull all season long. They've had a massive turnaround, and they, I think, are really the team that have made the most improvements and that are constantly putting Red Bull under pressure. I do have a feeling that this track will be really well suited to the McLaren. I think that's been one of their biggest strengths, is that their car does really adapt to a lot of the circuits, and it does go well almost everywhere at this point. So whereas the Red Bull feels as if it's still a little bit more edgy, a little bit more difficult,
don't we?
It's a car that isn't as the drivability is not quite there like it is in the McLaren, and I think maybe that will shine through this weekend.
It feels like when McLaren got over their problems with the slow corners, they actually made the whole car better. They almost sort of were looking at it going, oh, have we compromised anywhere else? But when it came to it, they hadn't. They purely solved that, it seems.
Yeah, they definitely have. I mean, I'm excited by this aero package that they bring here, this update, because usually when McLaren bring an update, not every team can make it work. We've seen with Ferrari, we've seen RB in recent times, that they bring this supposed better upgrade and it's actually worse, and they go back, they revert on it and go back. So, but McLaren seem to be different in that trend. They bring updates, it does work, it delivers performance. So I think the whole team, everybody that's a McLaren fan out there, should be excited by these updates, because as it stands at the moment, I think it is the fastest car out there.
And Andrea Stella has confirmed he's staying on. He signed a extension to his contract, a multi-year extension at McLaren. I was working it out the other day. In 19 months, he's had 21 podiums, including 2 race wins, which, when you consider where they were, that's an incredible turnaround. And all the feedback you get, God, look at that. You wouldn't think it was August, would you? When you look at where they were, it's a huge improvement, and obviously what they're doing at the factory and then bringing to the track is working.
Totally, and it seems like there's also a lot of praise for Andrea Stella. I mean, a lot of the talent at McLaren has been there for quite some time, but just repositioning a few people and really unlocking the talent and getting people to work in the most efficient way for the team has had a great effect on the team. But he still has a lot of challenges on his hands. I mean, whilst that car is quick, it is a young team, specifically on the pit wall, and they've cracked a few times under pressure, or maybe felt the need to be defensive when they should have been offensive. And this weekend's going to be challenging for them because the weather's going to be changing. The track, you know, there's a lot of opportunity around here to overtake, and the pit lane's narrow, so you can make a mistake quite easily. So this might be one where they need to, you know, prepare themselves well to not make some of the mistakes they've made in the past.
Well, at the moment, just a couple of cars on track. Logan Sargent and Charles Leclerc feeling their way around this Zandvoort circuit as the spray comes off the track and the wind is pretty strong here still. It's Pierre Gasly, the only one who's putting a real time at the top of the board so far. I say he's putting in time. He hasn't. He just did the first lap that was completed. So we don't actually have any times on the board yet as such that qualify as a time on the timing page. Everyone feeling their way around. I mean, when you're in the car in your shower right now, what are you looking for? You're looking for where it dries quicker in case you have sessions that change during it. What are you looking at?
Finding the grip. I mean, there's little nuances and things that will change. Sometimes tracks have been resurfaced. Maybe there's a bump on the track. It's a great learning opportunity, I mean, to have a free practice one in these conditions. As we said, we're expecting these types of conditions again this weekend. So it's just about finding those little things, finding little markers on the track, you know, turn-in points, things like that. Obviously, they do a lot of this work on the simulators heading into a race weekend like this, but there's nothing that quite beats being in the car on the track and really feeling it out there.
And he has his new teammate in red next year, of course, with Lewis Hamilton. And it's going to be a fascinating grid next year, isn't it, when we've moved these drivers around into these other teams to see how this whole thing plays out. We've got Audi coming in as well.
Yeah, I was thinking when we were talking about Carlos Sainz and the move to Williams actually earlier on, it would be a fascinating driver pairing to be alongside Alex Albon, who's performing really well. We see Kevin Magnussen just giving a pro explanation there of the steering wheel to, I guess, his friends or family that he's brought along to the track.
Some guests.
It's great, you know, there's such complicated pieces of equipment that you get to learn every single button on the steering wheel, amazingly, when you change teams.
It's blindfolded, he was
almost. It's one of those. It's one of those challenges for a driver actually when you change team, like Carlos will be experiencing next year when he goes to this team here we see on screen at the moment at Williams. You're having to relearn a lot of different controls, but yeah, the driver pairings that we talked about before, it's always exciting from us on the outside to be comparing the two different drivers, and really it's our best chance to compare because you're sharing the same equipment. Yeah, I mean, different drivers will always be able to get more or less out of different cars, and we see that through history. When drivers have changed teams, you can't say, well, so-and-so was faster than him there, then they changed team and was that one's teammate, so they must be faster than them, and then it doesn't really work like that. Different drivers perform better or worse in different cars.
So do you want a teammate who drives a similar style to you so that you create a car that's good for both of you, or do you want a teammate who drives the opposite style to you so that you can essentially get the two ideas to converge at a point that's good for everyone?
What tends to happen is that the team will look to the usually faster driver out of the two. You earn your status in the team, therefore, as the #1 driver. Whether it says 1 on your car or #2 or whatever, you earn your status from year to year, or even
without it being said out loud.
Exactly.
God, that's harsh.
But so therefore, to answer your question, the ideal thing would be that the two drivers have a very similar driving style, because then at least every day's debrief reflects in a similar way. Every step made on the car does also go in the same direction. So yes, ideally, same driving style.
We can see plenty of spray still on the track here in Zandvoort. Looks like the rain's eased up slightly, but the wind is still very, very strong. And 16 minutes into the session, we have our first timed sector. And Charles Leclerc is obviously fastest, 61, because he's the only person who's got to time through there yet. So let's go through this lap, Ant, as he feels his way round.
Yeah, so the challenge for a driver at this stage is that you've got an order from the team as well in terms of the run plan. You're aware of what they want from this session, but yourself, you're trying to find your way. As you can see there, it's turn 11. The car didn't like that amount of turning. The rear complained, and he ran a bit wide. A snap of exit oversteer from turn 12. So the driver, you feel like you're under pressure to get up to speed as quickly as possible in these conditions, or any condition for that matter, but it's always harder in the rain. And and in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about obviously not damaging the car. So it's a huge, it's a tall order for these drivers, really, to be getting up to speed, selfishly trying to work on your own methods out there, whilst trying to deliver what the team want from this run plan, this program that they might have set.
I just wanted to stay actually on board with Charles there, because I'm looking at the banking, and is there anything different about driving the banking? You look at it on TV and you think, wow, that looks challenging, but actually you've just got to take it at speed, or not? Is it not that simple? What's the art of getting around the banking?
Not doing that.
Well, yeah, not going off.
Well, the thing is, I think sometimes the banking can actually work for you a little bit, you know, in that you can really lean into it. Or sometimes, if you go into turn one, for example, you don't really see it that easily on the cameras, but there is a sort of slight incline there, and therefore you can brake later, because the track kind of brakes automatically, naturally brakes the car for you. So it is a different approach for sure, like much like cambered corners. It's just an extremely cambered corner, essentially, is what it is. But it is, I mean, around here, when I drove on this track, the banking in turns 14 and turn 3 weren't quite as extreme as they are right now. And even then, it felt different to most circuits. So now, the way it is over the last couple of years is really, really intense banking, and it's tough on the neck for sure.
That's the front right this time for Hulkenberg just grabbed again. So we saw the front left grab on the inside for turn 10.
Upgrades to the front of the car this weekend.
Yeah, this wouldn't be anything to do with the upgrade. This is just purely just the tyres being cold. But we often see this team struggle with braking, don't we? And especially in cold conditions and outlaps, for example. And this Hulkenberg again just struggling to slow the car down and stopping the front from locking up.
Lifts his hand in a bit of confusion then from him as well.
It doesn't look normal. Yeah, the level of locking there doesn't seem normal. And also in these conditions, don't forget that the teams have to make quite drastic changes in terms of the harvesting that the battery will be able to take from the electric motor at the rear, that sits at the rear of the car, and that relationship between the mechanical brakes and the electric brake. Are very different, obviously, in the wet compared to the dry, because you spend a lot longer on the brake pedal in the wet conditions. You therefore harvest a lot more energy, and at some point you saturate the battery, or the system, it saturates and says, I'm out, I'm going to hand over to the mechanical brakes now. And the teams have to really juggle that, actually, in these conditions, and the driver's speed can also dictate how much energy you're able to harvest. So the faster you go, the less braking you'll be doing, and then you'll be making changes through the systems to stop that handing over to the mechanical brakes as much. So it's a real tricky balancing act. These cars, these hybrid cars, are so incredibly complex. It's one of many idiosyncrasies you see once again running
straight. I mean, he did go and do a timed lap then, though, after going off.
This isn't driver error, basically, is what I'm trying to say. This is
trying to drive around an issue.
Yeah, there's an issue, whether it's mechanical on the brakes, or whether it's the hybrid systems not really playing ball with the mechanical brakes themselves. So it's something that's confusing him, definitely.
Another replay here. This is him going off the end.
So watch for the front right. This one, yeah, so the front right grabs again, and you can't slow the car down. Despite that banking there in turn 1 of 6 degrees angle, it's not enough to help slow the car down. So, and obviously a massive tailwind today going down into turn 1. On top of all of that,
we have this new clarifying of a directive from the FIA, don't we, coming into this weekend, which came out during the summer break, about the asymmetric braking systems. I'm not saying that has anything to do with it, but it's reminded me that we need to let people know about this new directive that's come in. So can you just explain to us what that is and why they're clarifying it, and I mean, what asymmetric braking would do, how it would be a benefit?
Well, so first of all, we've just been talking about the braking, and the fronts were locking more for Hulkenberg. So what you can do, and it's within the regulations, you can send more of your brake bias, they call it, more rearwards.
And we hear that on team radio sometimes.
Yeah, it's a bit like when you're on a bicycle, you've got your front brake and you've got your rear brake, and you mechanically adjust that yourself.
Yeah.
When you're braking, if you put too much on the front, the bike will
you could go over the
exactly.
handlebars.
So you manage that yourself, where these cars, they can do it electronically. You can go from front to rear or vice versa, depending on how you feel the balance of the braking is. So what you're not allowed to do is to shift the brake bias from left to right or right to left, dependent on the axle we just talked about, the front or the rear axle. What you're not allowed to do is shift that balance from side to side of the car. You can go from end to end, but you can't go from side to side.
Okay.
So that's your asymmetry coming into play that way. So you're not allowed to do that. And they've just, from my understanding, tightened up the wording to potentially stop teams trying to do that. Maybe teams were doing that, and that's why they've done it. And we don't know what's come first here, whether it's the wording that's changed to stop teams that have been doing it, or to stop teams that were thinking about doing it in the future.
Who may have gone to the FIA and said, I wonder if we could do this, is this clear? And then they've said, oh, that's not clear, we're going to clear that up.
But what it will do, why the asymmetric braking will be such an advantage is that in these kind of conditions, if you're trying to turn the car, you would want the inside wheel to be braking more, so particularly on the rear, to help steer the car around. The inside rear would brake more to turn you into the corner. In the drier conditions, if you've got a car balance that's quite nervous, twitchy, if it's too positive when you turn in, you want the outside brake to be braking more, because it's the loaded wheel, and you want the car to stop rotating so much. So it would be quite a big advantage to combat some unwanted car balance issues. A nice tool to be able to play with, and all of the teams, if it were allowed in the regulations, all of them would be all over it. But yeah, it's not allowed it wasn't allowed anyway in the current regulations. They've just tightened up the wording.
Rumble with George, fastest in the second sector, but the track's evolving, isn't it?
The track is evolving. It also looks like it's stopped raining. I mean, the skies above us look a little bit clear. The wind is still pumping, and coming through that last part of the banking, I mean, that corner feels like sometimes it lasts forever. Does a lot of pain to your neck. Then you come into turn one, and as we said, oh, it's just slowing down here now, so this won't be a very good example. But as Anne mentioned, there's quite a lot of banking there too, so you can really brake quite late going into that corner. Now we're riding on board with Oscar. So we're seeing more cars going out there finally. I mean, I think they think the conditions might be more representative. A lot of drivers going out on full wets, which we don't see a lot of anymore. I mean, most of the times they go out on the inters, and I wonder if that's because they're saving their sets of inters for later in the weekend whilst they're doing their discovery out there right now.
Don't want to waste a set of inters right now. Get them on when it's dried up a little bit. Bernie is in the pit lane for us and can tell us, Bernie, are we on the edge of intermediate conditions yet?
I think we'll probably need a few more laps. I think at this stage of the weekend you can't risk any car components, so it's always safer to go in the full wet. Just see Red Bull going past us now, also on the full wet tyre. It is still pretty damp on track. There's not a lot of heat in the ambient air to really help dry it up, but it's just the cars running, and that wind will help a little bit as well. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, Rachel, is we're just in front of Daniel Ricciardo's garage here. We've actually got 3 good drivers in the garage, because Liam Lawson was in the back a little bit ago as well. But teams start to make changes for these conditions, and it'll match what Anne was saying there about, you know, the braking on the Haas. The front brake ducts here, we've just watched them put this sort of line of silver tape on both of the fronts. It's actually a little bit different on Yuki Tsunoda's car, but that's to help increase the temperature that the brakes are running at in these very cool, damp conditions, to help get temperature into the tyres, because remember, the wet tyres now go on the car without having been in blankets, so those tyres go on cold, and it is about trying to make sure that you can generate enough temperature quickly enough. And the reason it's different across the cars, drivers slightly different or sides slightly different, is both drivers will have slightly different braking style. They've got slightly different amounts of energies into the brake, and that will add up to having to need a different cooling spec effectively on that brake. And then the final thing I just noticed, because we've been stood outside RB, is the pit lane changes for the last 3 garages. So earlier on in the pit lane for the top teams, we still have concrete, but it's actually really rough concrete. And then just at the RB garage, it goes to this, you can see the different colour, and it's much, much smoother. So these 3 pit boxes at the end, the RB, the Sauber and the Haas, that is going to be more of a problem for them during the race if it's wet.
Thank you very much, Bernie. Yes, they have extended, I think they actually they called it 6 garages in the release, but yes, they've extended the pit lane here, but it is one of the pit lanes on the calendar that has the 60 km/h speed limit because it is so narrow. And
Max Verstappen just adjusting his mirrors there. You can see
they've got new mirror stays again. They've been playing with these mirror stays quite a bit this season.
So you got the glass mirror inside that he's just saying up or down, and then that's why the mechanic had the little bits of tape that they put over the holes where you can get into the gap so they can tune it and afterwards they just put the tape over it again for the aerodynamics. So it's,
Wow.
I love those kind of details in Formula One. But yeah, Max there in the car, just looking at where he wants those mirrors placed, and sometimes you make that adjustment, you get out to the track and you think, oh no, I've got it wrong, it's pointing too far downwards or too far up.
Can be sort of some of the most frustrating stuff is adjusting your seat, adjusting your mirrors, and as Anne says, when you get out on the track it feels completely different because you've got all the force when you're braking, when you're accelerating, and your body position is naturally moving, and then those things all of a sudden just become really apparent that it's wrong. But yeah, even adjusting a mirror in the garage with a mechanic can be quite frustrating because that millimeter that you might want him to change it, he feels might be 3 millimeters, and it's sometimes a little bit of back and forth before you get in the perfect position.
We've got Sergio Perez out there at the moment on track, but I was going to mention that Helmut Marko over the summer break has said that Liam Lawson will be in a Red Bull car next year. Now, he hasn't stipulated whether that's with RB or whether that's with the Red Bull senior team, but if you're Daniel Ricciardo and Sergio Perez hearing that right now, that is saying turn up, put in some good performances, because one of you is going at the end of the season.
You're always under pressure on you at Red Bull, whether you're in the junior program or as Sergio Perez we look at there. Even when Sebastian Vettel was there as a 4-time world champion and Daniel Ricciardo arrived and started beating him, even he became under pressure and then saw the chance, the opportunity at Ferrari, and he decided to leave. Whether he jumped before he was pushed, we don't know. We'll never know that story as we see. Yeah, Max
is
come out on the intensity.
even though there's rain in 2 minutes' time, apparently.
Yeah, the track continues to dry, and it's not like it's freezing cold out there. So it should be, with this wind, it should dry pretty quickly if the rain just stops for a moment. But yeah, going back to the Red Bull program, the drivers are always under pressure. You think back, the other drivers we've seen, Alex Albon, for example, who I thought he was doing a pretty decent job as he was learning his way, but no, it wasn't enough. Out, next person in. So yeah, the message has been held up for all of the drivers to have a look at, and yeah, Liam Lawson has been promised at this stage, what we can gather so far, promised a seat for next year. Whether it's an RB or a full Red Bull car, we don't know.
But as we know in this game, how quickly things can change over one race. So if Daniel puts in great performances, he might secure his seat. If Checo puts some great performances in, he might be safe too. So we'll have to wait and see. But the fact of the matter is, this is the anniversary of Liam Lawson's...
Liam Lawson coming into Daniel crashed?
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
Or more on the positive side.
Sorry.
Liam Lawson's debut to Formula One,
yes.
where he absolutely, like it's a sink or swim moment, and he swam. And he proved on multiple occasions for the races that he replaced Daniel that he has what it takes. So he's another driver, a little bit like Jack Doohan, who's just kind of sitting, waiting. Of course, he's racing in another program, and that'll keep him going. But you've got Isaac Hadjar, also in the Red Bull stable, who's currently leading F2. So they've got incredibly talented drivers coming through, and they have to free up some opportunities. And I mean, I'm surprised that they've kept Checo. I mean, with everything we've just been discussing, how harsh Red Bull have been in the past with some of their drivers. They've let a lot slide with Checo, and I think he's probably still knows now that no matter what assurances they've given him, whether that's a contract or they've decided to keep him after the summer break, every single performance is going to be scrutinized and judged. So the pressure for Checo is definitely not off.
He's got less than half the points of Max right now. I mean, Sergio Perez is on 131 and Max is on 277. But more importantly, it's the constructors, isn't it? Because McLaren are now 42 behind.
Exactly. And there have been 14 races, seven race winners. All 7 of those drivers come from the top 4 teams, and the only one of the 4 teams, of the 8 drivers who hasn't won a race is Checo, whereas Max has won all the other races. So that in itself, it's not favoring them when you've got McLaren hot on their heels, with Oscar and Lando constantly putting out great performances, and now Mercedes as well. They've won the last 3 races. They've got both their drivers most of the time very evenly matched. So Checo, we know that we're starting to sound like a broken record at this point, but the pressure is going to be on his shoulders. It's just the nature of Formula One. You've got to deliver.
Indeed, indeed. Oh, what was that?
Spin there, just took the curb on the inside of turn 11. I don't think any harm is done.
Puts it with the rear,
and the crowd's cheering his impressive pirouette as he gets the car turned around and gets going again. But yeah, he just clipped the inside curb, which he could have done. We've seen a lot of drivers doing that on the wet weather tyre, full wet tyre. And maybe one of those corners on the, we saw that huge puddle get splashed up earlier on, didn't we? And by Carlos Sainz, and maybe the Inter, it was just one of those corners where it's all a bit too slow for it, a bit too wet for it, and as simple as that, the car goes round.
I mentioned the 60 km/h pit lane speed limit. Logan Sargent has exceeded it during this session. He's got a €100 fine already from the FIA. You're going a little bit too quick. It's usually 80, isn't it? But I'm sure they will adjust accordingly for the rest of the weekend. This is Max again. This is the...
Yeah, that was on that same lap, actually. He started the lap getting dangerously close to the outside of turn 1, and then we got a replay of the moment down towards turn 11, braking, turns the car in normally, hits the curb, and it was just that threw the car around. And yeah, your first push lap on those tyres, it's something that I'm sure all of the other drivers would have been looking at and taking note from, that when they go out inevitably on the inters, to maybe not take that curb as aggressively as they were on the full wet.
I wanted to come back to something you mentioned earlier, Naomi, when you were talking about adjusting the mirrors and adjusting your seatbelt, because we have Oscar Piastri here this weekend, who, because we think of his seat in Austria, ended up with a broken rib that he raced through Silverstone and raced through the Hungarian Grand Prix and won with. How does that happen?
Quite easily. I mean, if you hit a curb, you might have something, a less smoother surface on your seat in a spot. I mean, I remember last year when we were in Silverstone, we were talking to Alex Albon on our stage and just looked over his shoulder and I went, mate, your shoulders are bleeding, what's going on? And that was because there was just a little nudge or little niggles and not a smooth surface in the back of his seat that was rubbing when he was in the car. Of course, with the ribs, it can come down to so much. It can be hitting a curb, it can be that G-force, it can even just be weakened immune system, weakened bones. It can come down to so much. But what I can tell you, just because I don't know where it came from exactly, but what I can tell you is that driving with a broken rib or even bruised ribs is no fun at all. It is so difficult, especially in these cars where, as we say, the acceleration force, the braking force, the G-force, all of that can absolutely take the wind out of you when you've got an injured rib. And for him to be putting in such great performances in that condition, I mean, hats off, well done to him. I mean, that is big respect for him.
Yeah, phenomenal. Quite a surprise to see that X-ray appear on social media over the summer break. As we see, Max Verstappen went fastest, Esteban Ocon's just gone second quickest, but George Russell's picked both of them now with a 1:24.4. We know the track is above them all the time now. The sun is out. It's starting to make dry parts of the track. I mean, it looks pretty dry already now, some parts of this track. But we were watching just before with Lewis as well, and the news has come out that he is not taking Bono with him to Ferrari. Bono is staying at Mercedes.
Yeah, he's staying at Mercedes, is what I expected, really. I think it's difficult for engineers or any team personnel to go moving because of the driver they were working with before has moved. And yeah, Bono is well established at Mercedes, the team in Brackley. He's been there a long time and has actually had a promotion, so he's now going to oversee more of the engineering department, and but also staying on as an engineer himself on that side of the garage. So yeah, it would be strange for us, it would be strange for them, strange for the fans to see Bono engineering a different driver, whoever that will be, Kimi Antonelli or somebody else, who knows. But yeah, it's obviously a working relationship that's been fantastic over the years for us to watch, and yeah, for him to. It's strange for me to think we'll never hear the words "it's hammer time" after this season.
Well, you never know. What's "it's hammer time" in Italian? We need to find that out. But I mean, strangest of all, I think, for Lewis. Let's face it. Let's hear from him now, actually, because he was talking about that coming into this weekend.
I'm generally so happy for Bono. I really just ultimately wanted him to do whatever is best for him. Where he is in his life, he had to make the best call for what would be best for him and for his family. And that doesn't change anything really between us. We don't get to work together next to each other every day, which will be sad for both of us, and it's going to be emotional. But we're always going to be in each other's lives. So, you know, Bono's my brother. So, yeah, I'm really happy that the team have taken him on, and he's got this great opportunity to grow more within the team, because he's such a great asset for the team.
Decade of working together, decade or so of working together on that team. I mean, we saw the emotions at Silverstone when Lewis won, didn't we?
And it came from both sides. I mean, it wasn't just, we saw obviously a lot of, you know, images of Lewis, the tears, the emotions, but they both were feeling it. I mean, race engineers and drivers are a true pair. I mean, you work so closely together. It's such an important relationship, and communication styles, all that kind of stuff, it really does need to gel. So they've obviously got a situation between the two of them that's been working them wonders for many, many years. And you'd think that you want to bring someone like that with you, but you never know. I mean, they've been together, as we say, a decade or so. You know, it's a long time to be working together with someone. There might be a part of Lewis as well who wants to go to Ferrari for a fresh start. I mean, something new experience. And for Bono, it might be the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of rumors about who's going to take that second seat. It could be Kimi Antonelli, and if he is the one, then it could be a great opportunity to, you know, teach a young driver some stuff that an 7-time world champion will have left behind, and I think that in itself is super exciting.
Just before I come to Bernie, actually, on that relationship, we're watching the McLaren on board. What were you spotting on that, and how do you think that's handling this track right now?
I was just pointing to the screen to say that Norris has gone fastest.
Well, no, I know. But I thought there was a particular thing, because we're expecting them to go well around here. He's gone fastest, but the car looks as though it's behaving in ways others aren't necessarily right now, or it's a little bit more pliable, it's a bit more drivable.
I think, like you said before, it's just the track's drying all the time, and we see Gasly just pop up to P4 there as we look on at Oliver Oakes there at Alpine as one of his drivers runs off at turn 1 straight away. Pierre Gasly, after that great lap he's just put in, pushing a bit too hard into the Tarzan corner. But no, this funny camera that they have on the McLaren as well, tilting around like this, makes me feel sick when I watch it.
It's like a
have to look away.
ride, isn't it? Yeah, Bernie, I want to come back to you then on this relationship with your race engineer. I mean, we were on board with Lando as well, and Lando obviously has that relationship with Will Joseph, and he has a bit more of a senior role as well within the McLaren team, bringing the drivers along. It's an incredibly important one, isn't it? For good and for bad.
Yeah, I think the relationship between race engineer and driver, we talk so much about it. You know, we've seen Lewis just come into the garage now, and Bono's talking directly to him. And it's a very valuable relationship, but it is that relationship over the weekend. You know, that starts together on a Wednesday, and you work quite closely with them, but you work much more closely with the other engineers in the garage, with the mechanics all around you, with the team back at Brackley. You know, Bono's relationship with that side of it, with the entire Mercedes team, he probably spends a lot more time with those people than he does directly with Lewis, and that is one of the deciding factors. We often don't see race engineers move with drivers because they have more of a commitment to a team, and obviously, you know, from a family side of point of view, the move to Italy is quite a big one. It's not just like moving down the road to Milton Keynes.
Great stuff, thank you, Bernie. Just hearing that actually wind gusts now are around 30 kilometres an hour. They could get up to 65 kilometres per hour this weekend. I mean, that's what we're being told to expect in incredibly windy conditions. If you look at the flags outside, that's usually our a good gauge in here, and they are being buffeted ferociously. And
mostly pointing towards turn 1 as well, so that's probably why we're seeing so many drivers get it wrong and run out wide. The one that we saw from Pierre Gasly, it's just similar to Max Verstappen earlier on, actually, how he just sort of ran out of road as the car was getting blown out wide. But yeah, it's a challenge for the drivers. They can handle it though. They've driven in conditions like this before. It'll be easier once they're on the dry tyres, but like I said, the track is going to be ever-changing all the way through this weekend, and I like that. I like seeing the drivers have to dig deep and rely on their natural ability. You really feel the car through the seat of the pants, and you've got to be on it in terms of your feedback as well, guiding the team and what you want from the car. In any given moment where you can find an opportunity, you get a sense of the car underneath you. It's great to be able to absolutely nail that as a driver, and it's one of the key attributes you need.
And you have to be, so do you have to be, oh, the yellow flag in sector 1, and this, the slow-moving Joe Grenier, but other than that, no, everyone's back on green flag again. No, I was just going to ask you, so then on those weekends, you have to be super alert, you have to, do you get into a mode where you're like, right, okay, I have to be completely on it this weekend when the conditions are changing as much as they are at a place like this?
Totally. You know that when it's raining, when you're at a tricky circuit like this, when you've got additional factors like the wind, it just adds so much more, like a level of focus that you need. You can't be distracted. When the conditions are perfect, it just is easier. I mean, we'll just call it that. It is easier when the conditions are nice, sunshine, not too much wind, just stable, predictable. like this, as I say, with these wings, these cars are so sensitive to the wind. So it might be really helping you down the straight, giving you a tailwind, but when you get to turns, even just in turn one, that turns into a crosswind, and you can get all crossed up in your car. You start to feel like sometimes the weather conditions even feel wet when the conditions are completely dry, because you lose so much grip when you don't have the downforce, because the wind is affecting that, you know, stable air that you would typically have. So it's no fun. It's no fun, but it is a challenge, and some drivers thrive in those challenges and others less.
Robert Schwartzman's finding out about the challenge in for Valtteri Bottas in this session.
But he's well equipped to face this challenge head on, like we saw with Liam Lawson when he was given his opportunity on a changeable condition circuit at Zandvoort, and we all thought, wow, this is going to be so hard for him coming in, you know, after a practice. When did it happen to Ricardo? Was it FP2 or FP1? My memory doesn't serve me well on that.
Friday.
So he had to come in with limited track time anyway, on top of his limited experience in an F1 car. And he still delivered, so, you know, it can be done, but it doesn't mean that it's easy.
Well, we have 17 minutes of running, just over 17 minutes of running still to go. It is Lando Norris in the McLaren quickest so far, though, with a 1:20.3. Track drying all the time, though, so we'll be back out on those soft tyres again shortly, I'm sure. Dry tyres, at least. So Robert Schwartzman on the intermediates still at the moment, but as you can see, that dry line appearing more and more around the track. So he has gone quickest in that first sector, 27.5 through there. And I mean, is it on the edge of dry tyres, would you say?
It's not far away, actually. I thought it was going to dry quite quickly, but it's been more rapid than I would have imagined with just 16 and a half minutes remaining of the session. Robert Schwartzman, by the way, I think we were watching his teammate Joe, brand new, but Schwartzman fastest in the first sector. And yeah, don't forget, as Joe just pops up to P12. I wonder what's going to be for Schwartzman. Here he comes, he crosses the line. Well, up to P3. I was going to say, he's had a good season as well in the World Endurance Championship. He's teammates with Robert Kubica in one of the Ferrari hypercars. So yeah, he's had a really strong season.
And there's a seat free at Sauber for next year, Audi, as they will be,
well, I mean, what an important practice session this could be for him as well. And every time you sit in that seat and the spotlight's on you, it's always handy to have a great day because it will go far. I remember it happening to me in Friday practice sessions. You know, engineers putting me aside at the end of the day and saying that was a good day. You know your times are really good today. And yeah, have you been speaking to management and stuff about this? You know, how hard are you pushing? So it goes to show that you have a good day, it's going to get noticed by the engineers, not just from us watching the timesheets.
The numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
The numbers don't lie. As we see Yuki Tsunoda in number 22 on track for RB at the moment, and Max having a little nap in his car. He's not going. Oh no, there he is. Having a little rest while he waits to go back out on track. Do you think he'll be the first ones on those dry tyres? Is he waiting for that moment right now? Is there any point? Is there anything for him to gain right now going back out on another set of inters? Probably isn't, is there?
To go out on another set of inters, probably not, because you're going to need them throughout the rest of the weekend. I think if he is waiting the way he is right now, I think he's waiting for it to drive more, so that he potentially can get a run on slicks.
What are under those blankets?
Tell us. Show us.
Just show us. And you, George.
Any predictions? I think George is going to try some dry tyres. Oh, well, it says it's an inter under there.
Well, it is. I feel like it's still maybe a little bit too early to put it. Maybe in a race condition, you might go for it, might risk it.
No, I can't see. I'm trying. I'm trying to put my head around the side of the screen.
Those are mediums.
We have a dry tyre. Excellent news. We're going to see some dry running.
A chink in the armour allowed us to use what they had.
I still think that Max will be on them as well, as will the Mercedes, but we will see. Right, here we are. We've got two Saubers right now coming back in. Joe and Schwartzman, as you say, yeah, fantastic. That Robert Schwartzman, that's certainly got some attention as well. Let's see what he can do once he puts on those dry tyres as well. But so Lando Norris quickest on those inters in the first part of the session. Crowd now enjoying some sunshine. Ponchos, hoods are down. This is good news.
What a difference an hour makes.
Patiently waiting, everybody, the crowds and the drivers right now, patiently waiting to get out there and really see what they've got at the start of this second half of the season.
So we know some teams are thinking about running the slick tyres. We've seen Ferrari running, they're about to go out on a medium set of slick tyres. Whether they will actually send the car out with 30 minutes to go, with the track continues to dry, is yet to be seen.
Why would you not?
Well, no, just you don't really want to be the first one out there. You want to see how others get on, and there's a risk, obviously, of always crashing the car, which, yeah, there's a soft set for Piastri. Looks like he might be one of the first ones out there, but ideally you want to see others try it before you go out and play as well.
Bernie's down there. Bernie, who's going out first?
Well, yeah, I think exactly what Anne said. We are sitting and waiting, but we are ready on the dry tyres. I think, and I'm not these garages. There we go. So we've missed that one. But what we've seen happen in the Mercedes garage here, they actually changed the front wing on Lewis's car, and the reason they do that is they'll have a non-preferred wing on when it's a little bit wet, a little bit damp, more risk on the car, and they've put the preferred one on now with what I suspect is dry tyres. Not sure if it's medium or soft, but George is about to go out, so let's see what he's got on. Soft tyres down here, and they're getting ready to run this car and much closer to their, race condition, what they want to be running for the rest of the weekend.
Great, thank you very much, Bernie. Thank you. So yes, we have got cars out on the dry tyre softs on the Mercedes and the McLarens, but we thought we saw mediums on the Ferraris, didn't we, in the garage?
You can see on our screens here it says normal grip conditions.
I would call that normal.
I think the two McLaren drivers are thinking, I'll be the judge of that.
We're going out to find out for all of us right now. So, thank you, Oscar and Lando. But you can see there, can't you? You can see the dry line there at the moment. So it's been created from the running so far. But you have a different line in the wet than you do in the dry anyway.
Definitely.
Essentially. So it's not the racing line yet.
It might not be. We're going to watch and wait to see where they can find the grip. There's obviously a drying line, which in this case, some of the times it's right on the outside of the corner because that's the line they were using in the wet. So let's see how much they start to teeth. Like in this corner, that's completely the dry line, right? So some corners, it will be a version of the dry line in the wet, and other corners, you have to avoid the grippy line. So it'll vary from corner to corner, but let's just watch as he goes around and see. I mean, most of the track you could see was quite dry. I mean, there was a section there where the whole track across the track was dry. I think that has quite a lot to do with the wind out there. The temperatures are quite okay, the sun is shining, it's quite a porous surface, so all of those things will help this track dry really quickly.
But yeah, still a lot of water as well around chicane. Basically the slower speed corners is where you're going to have there's less turbulence, less airflow from the cars, and therefore it stays a bit wetter as Lando Norris pushes on through turn 3, through 4 and 5 up the hill, through turn 6 to the right, and then Skyflock corner turn 7 comes at you now. It's already a second up, and we'd expect that on the slick tyres. And the key is to get the heat into them before you get into the wetter parts of the track. And so that takes a bit of bravery, a bit of skill, obviously, and trust in the car. So that's another challenge for these drivers today. If you're a bit too cautious and you come to a part of the track like this, turn 10 where it's a bit wetter, you'll never get your tyre temperature up, and it's the temperature that gives you the grip from these Pirelli tyres. Now 2 seconds up before them. I would say the most treacherous part of that for them. You can see there running dangerously close to the edge of the track because of that brief lock-up, and you stick to the line like a train track. You can see it, a beautiful display of where you want to place the car. And through this final corner of turn 14, that 19-degree banked corner sends you back onto the start-finish straight. 3 seconds up, and 1 minute 17 on the board for Lando Norris. George Russell, you can see there, 4 tenths down, Piastri 9 tenths down. And this is what I love about these conditions. You really see different drivers approach it differently, and you see a huge disparity between them. And it's who is willing to take that risk or not. Lando's always one of those drivers that loves to give it a go, loves to get stuck in, and will generate that temperature in his tyres more than most other drivers can. And Russell pops up into P2. We're looking at Alonso as well. We pick him up on the exit of turn 12. He's another one that I'd be expecting to grab the ball by the horns and really hustle the car around in conditions like this.
Oscar's gone quickest in sector 1 on his second lap on these tyres.
You'll be going faster and faster as the track continues to dry.
It's not because it's a 2-lap tyre.
No, that's too early to read into that. I mean, these conditions, you're going to be getting quicker yourself. The track's getting quicker as well, and that mitigates the losses that your tyres might lose out on from lap to lap as they degrade. There's more time to be found basically by the track improving and you improving.
So you can't read anything yet.
No, definitely not. That's going to come when the track's fully dry and the drivers are more up to speed.
It was that tricky last part of the lap again, though, wasn't it? That 11 and 12, that was not perfect, but it will get there across the weekend. And he's George Russell's gone quickest in sector 2 with a 27.0. Match Piastri's time through there. Let's see what they can do. What Max Verstappen now out on track on the soft tyres. So he's looking to try and beat a 25.8 through sector 1 here.
Yeah, Max on the exit of turn 3 using the banking well, and on his way up towards one of the fastest corners on the track. I think the helicopter camera's just struggling to keep up with the car there. And yeah, sector 1, a personal best obviously for Max, but not the fastest of all as Alonso pops up to P3. We're going to see this changing all the time as the track continues to dry, and then you get into the stage where drivers have to slow down to recharge the battery, because an awful lot of lap time can come from that, around a second a lap on this circuit alone, just from you having a fully charged battery compared to one where you're having to have a bit of give and take as you harvest some more of a race kind of setup with the batteries. But if you can do a qualifying attack where you're just full deployment for the lap, obviously can give you quite a bit more of an advantage if you're not harvesting too much. Norris doing, so Norris on a fly of a lap as Verstappen ends his lap just a tenth and a half away to go P3. Now what can Norris do?
He's 1:14.5, first driver to get in the 1:14s.
And here is Leclerc on his medium tyres.
Opposite to, well, not opposite, I mean everyone else is on soft, it's not the opposite tyre, but different choice. Different choice to the others out on dry tyres right now.
Obviously they'll have the robustness built into them, but not the ultimate lap time as Sainz goes P5, Leclerc P8. Alonso improves his time to P2 as well as Antonio Giovinazzi watches on.
So Alonso got up to P2 in that Aston Martin. Their updates this weekend. Just trying to see what they brought this time, because there were some changes around. But at the moment, nothing new this weekend on the Aston.
Piastri really pushing on this lap. Saw the car squirming around on the exit of turn 9. He's 3/10 up on his teammate. For what it's worth at this stage of the weekend, but it's fun to see some faster times coming on the board, and it's enjoyable watching the drivers really starting to attack. And like Piastri is DRS open through that final corner, and that's why we have the banking, don't forget, in that final corner. The track designers were limited, confined by the track, what you could do with the design from the area around. Exactly, so they had to put in some banking if you were to use DRS through there to help give some more grip. And that is the DRS board just on the right-hand side there. So you can run DRS through this corner now. Without banking, would have been impossible.
Verstappen also looks just behind Sainz. We saw Sainz go past, and it looks like he's trying to buy himself a little bit of a gap, it seems. He's just abandoned that second lap to find that gap. Let's see if he gets going again. 5 minutes to go. Russell goes quickest
into the 1:13, so half a tenth quicker than Oscar Piastri so far. As you say, everybody finding time all the time at the moment.
Yeah, check again, all crossed up there through turn 11, 12. He's got some traffic as well in front of him before the penultimate corner.
So Aston and Lance Stroll in front of him.
He's going to be rewarded though with a handy toe down towards turn 1, but I'm not sure that Stroll will be pulling over to let him by. And yeah, so Perez finishes his lap. He's going to do a recharge lap after this one with 4.5 minutes remaining in the session. Just when it's getting exciting.
I know, Orlando's gone quickest again through sector 1, finding time all the time. Max not as quick on this lap. He's 6 tenths down in the first sector at the moment, but his second sector was a 26.0. But it's 25.9 is the quickest. So Lando going quicker again.
Yeah, finding more and more time every lap that these drivers push. Every time they attack now, Verstappen really held up there by the Alpine of, was that Gasly? Yes, it is. I'm not sure what Gasly could have done any different. I think he was comparing the lap actually as Verstappen was ending his.
And now it's Lewis Hamilton with the quickest sector one. We keep it going. We could do another few minutes of this.
Well, hopefully qualifying will be like this.
Well,
We have got rain predicted tomorrow.
I wonder how much of an indication this already will be of the potential that the McLarens have here this weekend. Max is obviously unbeaten around here. He's coming every year and just smashed it out the park. Now he's losing 6/10 in the first sector, and we know that he was really building up a gap. So the first 2 sectors he was clear, and then obviously he got that traffic at the end. But is it too early to say that McLaren have the upper hand? We don't know anything about fuel loads. There's a lot to still be deciphered, but you can see body language in a car. You can see it, and McLaren just look
They know it,
confident,
don't they?
they?
Max knows it, but he's going to enjoy, he's going to relish this fight. A bit like we're riding on board with Lewis now, when they went through their dominant era, Mercedes, and then the Red Bull started to catch every year before that crescendo in 2021 happened that we all remember so well. But he relished the fight. He loved it, and I feel like Max is going to enjoy it as well.
He's not, since this has come back to the calendar, he hasn't been lower than second in any session or qualifying segment at the Dutch, sorry, he wasn't at the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix. Such was their dominance around here, but he hasn't won a race since Spain. It's a long run. It's a long run.
Yeah, you feel like he's due another win at some point, whether it will be this weekend or not, yet to be seen. But George Russell getting all crossed up on the exit 11. This is what I saw before with Gasly and Verstappen. It looked a little bit worse actually off board than it was on board, but he still didn't like what Gasly did as the hand goes up.
Let's not forget, though, although it has been a while since he's won a race, and of course this championship battle is very much on, and he needs to gain as many points as possible to keep Lando behind him in this championship. But had he not have had those penalties in Spa, he was on pole position by quite some margin. So they will maybe have gone into the summer break a little bit more relieved than they thought they could have. Let's see how continues to develop over the rest of the season. I mean, there's 10 more races to go.
I do feel, though, that Max has grabbed some opportunities that maybe, dare I say, shouldn't have been there for him. Like, you know, the Imola victory, that was an impressive drive.
Outdriving the car.
Yeah, maybe not just outdriving the car, but just outdriving the competition, definitely, because he got more out of himself on those types of races than other drivers, I feel. It's like the victory in Imola, the victory in Montreal as well. Yeah. He absolutely, and the team as well, they perfected that race.
When there are others who think they should have won that race, and he's the one who won it, he was the difference that day.
You just can never count them out, can you? I mean, on a good day, on their day, whether it's Max as an individual, that car that he drives, or Red Bull as a team, I mean, they are a force to be reckoned with. And more often than not, they do get it right. And that's where McLaren are going to struggle, because if they're going to take them down, they need to absolutely dot all their I's and cross all their T's, and they can't leave anything on the board, because that's what they're dealing with here. And on that note, I think I'm going to leave you guys.
We'll see you shortly. We're heading back down to the paddock to join Natalie and Bernie. And we will stay with the last 30 seconds or so of this as we... it's just traffic out there now, isn't it, for everybody?
It is, yeah. Lewis struggling there with traffic. I think that was Alonso, in the way through. And despite that, set the purple middle sector. But it's the nature of this track. It's a very short circuit. We're going to see a lot of this in qualifying as well, particularly Q1 when all of the cars are on track sharing it together.
I mean, he was just under 2 tenths slower than Norris, even with all that going on. I mean, that's looking promising for them as well this weekend.
We've seen from the last couple of races that Mercedes really are there. I think as a team, they genuinely believe that now. So they finished this session second and third for what it's worth. Albon's up there in P4 as well. A great session from him, and Hulkenberg in P6. So yeah, lots of drivers getting a lot out of their equipment here. Some drivers not getting a clean lap because of traffic, but I think we shouldn't be surprised anymore, basically, is what I'm trying to say with the performance of the Mercedes. I think we've seen now on lots of different styles of circuit that the car is there, and it's up to them now to deliver the perfect setup, the perfect balance for their drivers from here on in.
And they did say to us, didn't they, a few races ago, we understand this car now. We've got it. We know what we've done to turn this corner. So now it's just trying to continually improve on that as Max goes quickest in the final sector. And then Lando Norris pips him to the line again by 2 tenths. This is going to be a fascinating qualifying session. Whatever you have planned for your Saturday afternoon, take your device with you or stay home and watch it, because this is going to be a good one.
It's what we all expected. We all expected a close fight here. We expected a close fight from this point through to the end of the championship. McLaren really are there. Red Bull with Max Verstappen, of course, we're just saying, you know, leads the championship. Well, both championships, constructors and drivers. We cannot discount him. He could very easily win this race again for a 4th time running.
Mercedes are there.
Mercedes are there. Ferrari are working hard.
The soft tyres yet.
Exactly. So, but we come to this point now in the championship, and this generation of Formula 1 car, where in the rules the teams are starting to get it, and they've closed up. Some, I would say, like McLaren, maybe even overtaken Red Bull in certain circuits, like Budapest, for example. It was the better car than the Red Bull that day, or that weekend, and they might well do it here as well. And I just think bring it on for the remainder of the championship.
I mean, that graphic tells you 3 tenths over the Red Bull through the slow corners. So, I mean, we mentioned it earlier, they got on top of that, but actually now to translate that to the rest of the circuit.
So it's cutting. That was the end of the second sector, just before the braking into 11.
Right.
And then, yeah, on the radio, I had so much traffic. He really did. It was like the M25 out there for one moment, but he didn't give up. He carried on pushing there to deliver a pretty good lap time at that time.
Now I know how you drive on the M25. Weaving in and out of the traffic.
I'm the one holding people up.
Of course you are, of course you are. Practice starts on the grid then now for the drivers. You want a good getaway. I mean, starts have actually had quite an influence this year for some of the drivers. When they've had a sluggish start or a second phase, it's cost them.
Well, when it's so competitive, that's, you know, in many ways, that's why George Russell was excluded in Spa, because of being underweight. You have to start looking into every detail that gives you performance when it's that competitive. And you don't have the luxury anymore, looking back at Max Verstappen and Red Bull, they don't have the luxury of having a bit of a lap start, or running the car slightly too heavy, or, you know, not completely optimizing your qualifying lap. Those luxuries are gone. It's too close now, and yeah, we see Lando Norris. I can't remember which event it was.
Austria. He says it wasn't the start in the end, but he did talk about it and say that you know, had he got away and Oscar not got ahead.
Yeah, I think I did it on the Skype, didn't I, before the start in Budapest, when he lined up on pole position, saying now he really needs a good start. And he did get a decent start there, but he still allowed Oscar to draw alongside and get him into the first corner. And in Barcelona as well, lost out to Max Verstappen into the first corner again. So it is such a critical thing to get right, not just from a driver's point of view, but from the team, your start strategy team around you as well. As you can see, Lewis going through the controls on his steering wheel and neutral at the moment. You do a bite point find for the clutch, so you get the clutch in the optimum position, and heat as well, because that changes your start performance. First gear, drop the clutch a little bit and then release it further on the second phase, as we call it, of the start, of the launch. A very short run down towards turn 1 here.
Looked fairly clean for him. Looked fairly, but I mean, that's not obviously not the one that counts, but it looked fairly clean for him. I mean, you used to have the two. Used to be able to use 2 pedals, 2 clutch pedals?
You used to be able to use 2. I mean, it's changed over the years a lot. You used to have a full-on launch system in the car where you literally just press one button and the thing would do it all itself. And I think the FIA thought this is getting a bit ridiculous. So then it was, yes, you had to manually release the cars, the driver, no influence from the software. So then they went to the 2 clutch pedals. You'd have one preloaded,
yes,
and you have the other one fully depressed. So when you released one of them, it would go revert to the one that was a little bit
reduce any more chance of any
error. So you basically slip the clutch at some point and then release the other one. Whereas then they saw drivers were doing that and said, you're not allowed to do that anymore. You have to have one clutch pedal. You're not allowed any detents on it at all. So it has to be one fluid motion on the control. There's lots of tight rules regarding the starts now these days.
As we see the Williams being brought back in case you didn't hear it, Logan Sargent in that car wouldn't be in it next year because it's Carlos Sainz who's taken that seat at Williams for 2025. Still 10 races though for him to run for the rest of this season, because we've had 14 of our 24 now, but we are back. The sun has come out as well, just to make sure that we really know where we are. And we're back racing in Formula One again for 2024 as the final cars pull into the pits, and one of the narrowest pit lanes on the calendar. And it's been extended this year just to try and help a little bit, but it's really tight. You can just see there between those garages. Right, so Lando Norris on an ever-evolving track went quickest around this circuit on the shores of the North Sea. Water's calmed down a little bit. Still not enough for a swim, though. Lando topping the times then from Max Verstappen, who was 2/10 behind him, 2/10 slower in that session. But times improving all the way through. Lewis Hamilton 6/10 behind them. Then came Carlos Sainz and George Russell. Alex Albon quick in the Williams, just 8/10 off Norris. Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen, both Haas in the top 10 there in that session. Joe Granu 10th quickest, but over a second and a half behind. And then we come to P11. Lawrence Stroll was leading the rest of the 20 drivers. He was 1.8 seconds behind Lando Norris. Then Sergio Perez in the other Red Bull had a bit of traffic out there as well, though Charles Leclerc, both Ferraris on the mediums. He was back 13th quickest ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, Fernando Alonso. Good effort from Robert Schwartzman in the other Sauber in for Valtteri Bottas in that session. Then Logan Sargent, Esteban Ocon, Daniel Ricciardo and Pierre Gasly rounding out. The 20 drivers will be back for second practice later.